Welcome to the TriDot Podcast. Today, I have Coach Stephen Horan, longtime TriDot ambassador, and now the head coach of Ironman Endurance. Coach Stephen just completed his 20th Ironman at the World Championships in Nice. So I asked him to come share the top lessons he has learned from his own racing experience. I'm Andrew, the average triathlete, voice of the people, and captain of the middle of the pack. We treat the show like any good workout. We'll start with a warm-up question, settle into our main set conversation where we'll see what we can learn from Coach Stephen, and then wind things down by having Coach Stephen answer an audience question on the cooldown. Lots of good stuff. Let's get to it.
This is the TriDot Podcast, the triathlon show that brings you world-class coaching with every conversation. Let's get started with today's warm-up.
All right, Coach Stephen, welcome to the show. So happy to have you on for the very first time. And since we're talking about your race history and all the different races you've done, we're going to hear a lot of different Ironman this, Ironman that thrown around today. I thought a fun warm-up question would be this. From all the races you have done, what has been your favorite swim course, your favorite bike course, and your favorite run course? Take it away, sir.
Oh, Andrew, thank you. This is very exciting to actually be on. So glad you reached out for me to be able to be here. So it was hard, right? When you kind of think
Yeah.
about like favorite, you have to like, okay, what is it? Is it like the best location? Is it the fastest? You have to kind of think
Yeah.
through that overall. So I'm kind of hit both and on those in that sense, right? But swim course, my favorite, no doubt, has been Kona. That is like the
Okay.
most beautiful water when you go. It's hard, right? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not the greatest swimmer. I know you said similar things, right? It's like I'm not the greatest swimmer, and it's non-wetsuit, but it's really beautiful. But when I think about my favorite swim, it was actually Ironman Chattanooga because it's fast. It was wetsuit legal. You can jump in the water, and you can basically float down and easily make cutoffs. So
Yeah.
kind of a both. From a bike standpoint, I mean, I've done Nice twice now, and Nice is the most beautiful bike course. I mean, it is really hard, so that doesn't make it fast. Really a lot of climbing, but and also the downhills, but the scenery was beautiful, and we'll talk a little bit more about that today. But I really took the time this year to spend the time looking at it. I don't remember a lot from 2023 doing it. I was like, man, I just got to get through it, but just spending the time has been really good this year to be able to kind of really enjoy that course a little differently. And then run, that one was a hard one. And I think, there was a couple of races and, the loop courses are nice, but also the crowd support is really good. And I had really two that I was going back and forth because Nice, yes, very good crowd support, but it's an out and back, out and back, out and
Yeah.
back, out and back.
Just down to the airport and back, down to the airport and back.
Exactly. But I'll tell you, Ironman Texas is awesome. I mean,
Yeah, that's a good run course.
It's just the crowd support. You're kind of running your group, if that's with you, your family can jump back and forth really easy to see you multiple times. There's another race, though, that I was able to do, and we'll talk about it, Ironman Frankfurt. But that was like really very, very similar. And it was just the same way. I mean, the Europeans are just crazy in the sense of their amount of support. And it's just really, it was pretty awesome, both at the finish line also, because you go into this small area, you kind of funnel down, and then they just have stands with bunches of people just out there. And it's just like it was a whole party all day long. So I would say Texas and Frankfurt were really the two for that one.
Yeah, and I love here, Stephen, that we're already getting a glimpse of some of the races you've done, and we're going to talk about all those races in the main set a little bit more. This answer for me, the swim course was the easiest decision. This swim course is undefeated for me and will probably remain that way. Ironman New Zealand, if anybody's been there, it is crystal clear lake water. I'm sure it can get choppy on a stormy day, but for the most part, it is just a tranquil, peaceful, flat. It is just the easiest. You can see everybody around you. You can see the buoys. You can see everything. So easy. The temperature is perfect in a wetsuit. That was my very first Ironman event, and it spoiled me for the rest of them. I have done the swim in Kona. I obviously haven't raced Kona, But while I was there representing TriDot, we went and days before the race, got in the water at Digby Beach, swam to the copy boat and back. So that is a great swim venue that I have not raced personally. But yeah, Ironman New Zealand is my swim. For the bike, all the Ironman events I've done, I've never loved any of the bike courses. I've liked some of them. My favorite bike course I've done is the bike course at Clash Daytona. You cannot beat spending the first few laps of your half Ironman just being on your bike on Daytona Motor Speedway, doing laps around the NASCAR track. Such a cool experience. We rave about it and rave about it and rave about it because it is it's just a unique one. So I'm going to give a shout out to that one. Once you're off the race course, the rest of the day is kind of boring, but it's flat and fast. So no complaints there on flat and fast. For my run, I'm going to give a shout out to two races. My favorite triathlon run ever was probably the run at Escape from Alcatraz.
Hmm.
It's just such a unique experience. You're on and off trails. You go through tunnels. You go up and down the sand ladder. You're on the beach. You're off the beach. You're climbing a hill. You're bombing down a hill. The Golden Gate Bridge is always right there. Just so cool. That's not an Ironman event. So to give a shout out to an Ironman event, I'm going to say 70.3 Greece. I really enjoyed that run course. They've moved this race since when I did it. So if someone goes and does Ironman Greece and they hear me say this, it's probably a different run course now. But when I did it, it kind of went through this kind of protected marsh land that was like on the coast, and so it was just like this really cool like gravel trail running, just always by the ocean, always by the bay, and it was just really beautiful. And when you weren't by the water, you were kind of going through these rustic Grecian small villages that had some crowd support out cheering for you. So really cool run course there in Greece. So those are my shout outs. Ironman New Zealand, Clash Daytona, Greece Alcatraz. We're going to throw this question out to the TriDot audience. Make sure you answer this question. You can answer it either on YouTube, watching the YouTube video of this conversation. You can answer this question on Spotify, watching the Spotify video version of this conversation, or you can answer this question on our social media accounts. We'll post the question everywhere because I want to hear from you. From your own personal triathlon race experience, what's your favorite swim course? What's your favorite bike course? What's your favorite run course? Can't wait to hear what our audience has to say.
Let's go.
On to the main set where Coach Stephen is going to walk us through the 20 Ironman events he's done, specifically pointing out from each race one lesson that he learned. And Coach Stephen, it's your first time on the TriDot podcast. So before we get to that, I do want to kind of give our audience a chance to get to know you, who you are, what your history in the sport is, and then we'll rip through those 20 lessons. So let's just start here. Just where did you even start as a triathlete, and what has been kind of the short version of your journey from new triathlete to 20-time Ironman finisher?
Yeah, you really have to think about. So my background, I'm a Marine, so I was in the United States Marine Corps. I was kind of more of a runner by trade. And, I think a lot of people have transitioned from running into triathlons, and I'm really that same story. So it made it a little more challenging for me kind of going into, hey, how do I swim? How do I bike? And I started in 2001. I got recalled back to the Marine Corps just for a period of time after 9/11. And one of my other Marines that was with me, he kind of challenged me to do something a little bit different more than just running. And he motivated me to be able to go back and say, hey, let's go do a triathlon. And I returned back home, bought my very first road bike, and signed up for
Wow.
my first pool swim. Probably similar to most people, I
Yeah.
barely could swim across the pool without stopping, and thank God it was a pool swim because I did have but it was funny. I went back and looked at some old pictures before, and I was wearing the typical tight run shirt, and I really didn't even have tri shorts. It was just regular shorts,
Yeah.
and but that created that movement for me and saying, "Hey, how do I do something different? How do I challenge myself?" And as the typical runner, I was always running, and I just couldn't continue doing it, and that motivated me to say, "Hey, let me go to that next step within triathlons." And once I started, you start forming that community. And it was the community that kind of drug me along to my very first Ironman. And I was doing a little bit of 70.3 distances. White Lake is one of the local races here in North Carolina that I did multiple times. And then I started the 70.3 series within the Ironman, and I did like Ironman or 70.3 Raleigh, which is not around anymore. But my very first Ironman was an iron distance race. It was 2008 with the Iron or Beach to Battleship in North Carolina. And my friend that was I was training with actually kind of taunting me, saying, "Hey, let's go do this together." And the funny thing is he actually did not even go and race. He kind of dropped out training. But I formed that community because I started grabbing on with other people that were training, and I learned more about the Ironman brand. I learned more about those races. And immediately after Beach to Battleship, I signed up the day after for Ironman North Carolina. And this is
Wow.
the time in 2008 when you went to go register for a race, if you weren't on the next day it opened, you would not get an entry. And it was just, just really excited to be able to go do that. But, kind of continued on through, and to be able to go do that and realizing that, hey, what does that take? What is that community? And we'll go into a lot of those details with some of those different races. But it was really a whole aspect of just starting at the very beginning and, saying, hey, can I go do this? Learning how to swim, learning how to bike, forming that community and really jumping forward to be able to kind of taking those steps as I kind of progress along.
So Stephen, I'm curious, where in your training and race history did you start racing with TriDot? You're a TriDot coach now. You coach your athletes through TriDot. You've been a longtime ambassador for TriDot. I've known you for a number of years. Met you a couple times at races. You're already rocking the TriDot polo here in the podcast video. How did you discover us? When did you start using TriDot, and what difference has it made for your journey?
Yeah, so most people don't know. I did my very first stance with TriDot in 2014.
Okay.
It was before all the apps.
Yeah.
Everything had to be printed off. I remember meeting with Cindy and having my first discussions with Cindy. And in the preseason project, one of the things that you ended up having to do, very different than where we are today, is you had to submit a paper at the very end about all the stuff and all your learnings. Um, I decided at that point, and it was mostly probably due to timing for me and when I ended up doing it, it was not right for me. I ended up doing the preseason project over Thanksgiving and over Christmas, and I'm like,
Yeah.
it was killing me. And I'm like, oh, this isn't flexible enough or anything. So I did not take on TriDot at 2014, but I came back to TriDot in 2020. I was kind of started the whole process in 2019 and 2020. I came back to TriDot full time in the sense of trying to say, hey, how do I want to do that? And probably like most people that have been in the triathlon and kind of continue doing it, you start going and you do all these different things. And I wanted something different. It wasn't because I was injured. It wasn't but I wanted something because I felt like I was very stagnant with my overall fitness. And so for me, getting the TriDot, really trying to do and being very focused in the training become very important for me. And I was, my kids were a little bit older at the time, in 2020. I mean, my kids today are 21 and 18. But in that sense, it just gave me the opportunity to be really focused. And we'll go through. I mean, really, I was starting to set bigger goals. I wanted to ensure I was going to get, to Kona, and this was an opportunity for me to be able to do something different.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. So I want to get us to the heart of our episode where we're going to hear from you on your 20 Ironman events and you have one takeaway lesson from each of them. I'm just going to kind of let you go race by race and share what the race was, what the takeaway was. You can kind of share the moment or the race story behind your takeaway, and we'll just kind of see how our conversation flows for the next 40 minutes. But I'm excited to get into it. So let's start with Ironman number one and lesson number one. It was Ironman Florida in 2009. What was your takeaway there, Coach Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, my big takeaway is find your reason. And I know a lot of people talk about, you got to understand your why. And this first race really taught me the most fundamental lesson, right, of that. I mean, again, I was probed a little bit, but there was some community behind it. But it was really, I had to start understanding that. And, understanding that with that, it was my loved ones, I'm setting the example for my family, what those overall aspects. And I think you need to make sure as an athlete that you really do understand the why. And I gave some stuff and, Andrew, as we were talking earlier, it's like, every race is hard and no matter how many I've done. And so you have to understand that, right? And because that's what's going to help you get through those toughest miles. And for me, yes, I had done a race in 2008, the Beach to Battleship, but it really going to Florida, the getting out into the ocean for the very first time. I mean, it was just very, very challenging. And I had to understand that I was setting the example for my kids, to be able to go do that, that I wanted to be able to kind of continue thinking about being healthy and setting those overall examples to be able to get through all of the training, and the overall race. But you got to have that. And that becomes the basis. I think that kind of led, and I'm not saying your why doesn't change, but
Yeah.
it's what led me every single race is understanding that why. And so I'm glad I did learn that early on because it became that basis to be able to move forward.
Yeah, my when I did my first full distance Ironman and only full distance Ironman to date, my why honestly was just to have it on my resume as a triathlete that I had done a full distance Ironman. I wanted to be able to like call myself an Ironman. I wanted to be able to put an Ironman window decal on the car and have people be like, "Oh, you did an Ironman," and like not have to say, "Oh, I did a half." Like like I wanted to just know that
Yes.
I had
Yeah.
done one full, and
No
I've
doubt.
only done the one full. Frankly, I mean, people, longtime listeners will know I just enjoy the middle distance more, and so that's more what my target is. I think I will do a full again, but yeah, I got to find that reason. I got to find that why. And honestly, I think that reason and why will probably be 8 years from now, 7 years from now, when my kid is old enough for her to realize, like, oh, dad is chasing something hard. He's doing something hard. He's putting in a time and effort to do something hard, and that's what it looks like to dream and work towards a dream. And that will probably be my why on Ironman number 2, and that will probably be a long time from now. But I love this being your very first one. You had to find your reason on race number 1, and I love that you mentioned that in the 20, it's changed from race to race. But each time you've identified what that reason is. Correct?
Yes, and I'll tell you, I mean, no doubt, my family is fully behind, and my daughters, even as old as they are now, love going to races.
Yeah,
And
that's cool.
my oldest ended up not being able to go because she works now, but we FaceTime her in while I'm actually racing,
Yeah,
and
cool.
that she said, "I know this was hard, and congratulations." And so that example, I think, makes a big difference. And I think you can have multiple whys also. And one of the things as your daughter grows up, I think it's just awesome to be able to continue setting that example.
Yeah. So Ironman Wisconsin 2011. This was race number 2. What was your lesson from that race?
Yeah, it was trained with community and a little bit of background, right? I mean, you got to realize that racing and doing all of this is not really a solo endeavor. It makes it hard if you try to do it that way. And I was during that time, I decided to go back and get my MBA at the same time.
Oh wow.
And it was kind of this community that we had originally formed in 2009 that helped pull me along to Wisconsin. And they're like, "Oh, Wisconsin's an awesome area. You got to be able to do that." But finding that group and working with them, they helped bring me along, get me prepared for Wisconsin. It was Wisconsin, and it has been my slowest of all my races because I did not prepare as much because of school. But really understanding that and sharing that passion with a group of folks, right, just made the biggest difference overall to be able to kind of continue trying to say, "Hey, how do you make this happen?" And again, I mean, a little couple. I went from 2009 to 2011. I did a bunch of 70.3s in between, but it was that same community that we were able to be able to go and do Wisconsin with.
Yeah, I love this one. I think my first 2 or 3 years of doing triathlon, I would roll up to a local sprint or Olympic. I wasn't in a tri club. I didn't know anybody else who was doing this, and so my wife would come support me, and that so we would hang out. But I think finally my third or fourth year in triathlon, I got plugged in with a tri club that was based out of a local triathlon store in my area. And it really just brought my
Mm.
experience in the sport to life, right? Like all of a sudden you're on Saturday group rides, you're at Wednesday track runs, you roll to races and there's 20, 30, 40 people wearing the same kit as you. Oh my gosh, it just really brings the whole experience to life. So I love that that's a lesson you caught so early on in your race career as well. Race number 3, Ironman Chattanooga in 2014. A 3-year gap, Stephen, a 3-year gap from Wisconsin to
Yeah.
Chattanooga. Maybe you were finishing your MBA. I'm not sure. But what was your lesson from Chattanooga in 2014?
It was really, I mean, and again, it's about that time in between, but it was around setting goals, right? And really being able to go do that. Now, I really kind of transitioned at that point because it was Chattanooga and pre Chattanooga that I kind of set the goal to go to Kona. And that's kind of
Okay,
the
wow.
background. It was like, hey, how do I go do this? And I got to give you the story. Is like this group that I
Yeah.
had been training with Wisconsin, there were two folks in my town that actually got lottery slots. Now, this is they used Ironman used to do lottery slots to go to Kona. Two people that did not know each other got lottery slots the same year to be able to go to Kona. And that like just started motivating, like, how do I go do that? Well, that's when Kona ended up, or excuse me, where they got rid of the lottery slots. And basically, I think it was 2015, they ended up doing that. But Kona became that bigger goal. And
Okay.
having that goal in place to say, hey, how do I go do that? And again, working really hard in between on 70.3s, loving life, kind of realizing I can run pretty well, still need to work on my swim. But really trying to think about like how do you set those goals and really making them in manageable segments. Ironman Chattanooga that year ended up being my fastest race out of all of them. Because, and even though it's officially at the time, Ironman Chattanooga is 114.6. So there was 2 extra miles on the bike. It is a fast swim, but realizing that that was something that I was working really hard for, right? And really kind of saying, hey, how do I move forward? How do I set that into place? How do I go qualify to be able to get to Kona? And that was really what I kind of started setting my eyes for my overall goals to be able to move forward.
Yeah, and goals in this sport can be all sorts of things, right? It can be to finally crack the top 10 in your age group, to land on the podium in your age group. It can be qualifying for the worlds or similar. My current goal in this sport is I really want to go under 5 hours at the half Ironman distance. I went 5:02
Love it.
in Daytona a number of years ago. I don't have that fitness now. I'm trying to get that fitness back, and I'll get there thanks to TriDot. But yeah, I want to go under 5 hours at the half Ironman distance before I think about going long again. So anyway, it's yeah, there's a number of quality goals somebody can have, and I love that that's lesson number 3 here.
It's a little
Ironman,
round right around the corner, just right next to you, right?
Steven, it's so funny you say that. Yesterday, in our company chat, Coach Ryan Tibble put out the post that it is officially sold out. It is officially sold
Oh,
out. A lot of triathletes in Texas, and I'm sure they knew that, and so it sold out pretty quickly. I was toying with the idea of doing it, and I just didn't jump in time. Did not jump in time. So I do
I
have a
will be there. You
70.3.
got to come up and see me. I'll be
Okay,
there.
Steven, the swim start is 21 minutes from my house. So I was like, how can I have to go do this race? It's so close to the house, but I will be there cheering for sure. That's absolutely certain. If
Awesome.
they release more slots, I'll think about it. But yeah, I'll be there for sure. Ironman Louisville 2015. What was your takeaway from that this is number 4?
Yeah, pressure is a privilege, right?
Mm,
And again, got to give you a little bit more background.
yep.
Um, I had a bike wreck about 5 weeks before Ironman Louisville. I separated my shoulder. I was pretty dinged up. I mean, I couldn't go outside. I couldn't run. And it was a lot of pressure kind of going into that race. And, I was really trying to think about like, how do I get to that race and be able to compete? And again, now have this goal to get to Kona. And I'm like, I signed up and still a little bit of conservative and cheap and didn't want to lose the money to be able to go. I really had to say, hey, how do I go and just have and reframe my mind and have just a race to get completed. And so, really kind of taking that pressure and saying, hey, how do I do it? And really being able to be, agile and saying, hey, how do I go and still train? I mean, I was actually sitting on the trainer with my arm in a sling and, just making sure couldn't swim. But, it's just one of those things to be able to kind of make happen. But what you have to do is kind of reframe that pressure, right? And saying, hey, what is it? What am I able to go do? How am I able to kind of go and celebrate what I do have the ability to do? And we always say control what you can control. I couldn't control that I couldn't go swim, but I could control making sure that I was taking care of my arm. What I did go do is I was, went and did kick drills, in the pool.
Yeah.
So you have to do those things and to be able to take that pressure and really realizing that you can still go and perform and to really to kind of take yourself to that next level.
Yeah, and to put it in a different way, just the fact that we get to do this, the fact that we get to line up and do
Exactly.
triathlon is a privilege, right? It's we have the health, we have the body, and in your circumstance here in Louisville, even though the circumstances were not ideal, even though your body was not 100%, the fact that you could go toe the line, knock out that race, enjoy the day, yeah, it's a privilege to get to do this. Ironman Frankfurt in 2016. You finally went overseas. You went international for a race. All of our European listeners, Stephen, finally came your way in 2016 to Frankfurt. What was your takeaway from Frankfurt?
Yeah, it was make it fun. I mean,
Yeah.
again, my group has continued to grow, all through these times. And you can kind of see I'm starting to do a little bit more. I went from 14 to 15 to 16. And, with that, I had a group and we actually went as three other families with me. This was the first time my family got to go over to Europe. I had been there for work personally, but, it's like, how do we make it fun? Right. And, this was a brand new country. I mean, Frankfurt is an amazing area, right? And again, I think the Europeans do a great job, and I highly recommend for those in the U.S. if you don't, if you got to go take the opportunity and go race overseas at least once. It's just a very different experience. I mean, the roads are 100% closed. I mean, that was awesome. You're going through these beautiful towns, but really kind of taking that as an opportunity, right? And I think we have to remind ourselves in all the midst of the hard training and all the midst of it the race, the actual race and the finish is about, really being able to celebrate. Right. And, being able to take my family over to Europe, being able to go spend a little bit of time. And we went from Frankfurt down to Paris afterwards on the train. But, you got to make it fun. I mean, a lot of people talk about it's not just racing, but, going on these race stations, right. And be able to have fun when you're able to go do it. But it's also kind of, it's not just race day and it's not just at the race. You got to have fun also during the time while you're training. And I think this was really good because we had a few people where there was actually five of us racing all together there. Again, it was only four, three other families, but five of us were racing. And it was just fun to be able to all be racing for or training for the same exact race. And again, I think, that you'll see that as a theme overall. You got to find your community. Right. And I think that's what makes it fun and bringing your family along and having those abilities just really make the difference for all your races.
Yeah, I think of an age group athlete in particular, like we're not going to the races and earning money. Like this isn't our livelihood.
No doubt.
Right. And I imagine for the folks that who it is their livelihood, it's probably fun for them because they're fast and they get to be fast. But for the rest of us, like yeah, you can have goals, you can have aspirations, you can have nerves going in the race day because you want a certain outcome. But if in your day-to-day training or your race weekend or your race day, if it's not fun, if you're not enjoying it, like you've kind of lost the plot, right? And so I love that reminder here. And it reminds me of that there's a TriDot ambassador who's coached by Brandy Ramirez. His name is Chris Tubbs. Shout out to Chris Tubbs, wherever he is. I'm not sure if he's a podcast listener or not, but we follow each other on social media. Anytime he posts about his triathlon training or triathlon racing on Instagram, he always puts the hashtag, I love this SHIT. And it's I love that mindset, right? I won't say the word on the podcast, but I love that mindset that just like man, I just got done with a grueling workout. That was wild. Try to have me do what? Man, I love this bleep. Like yeah, it should be fun, Chris. Good job. Good job. So Chris gets it. Ironman, North Carolina 2016. What was your takeaway?
Yeah, the bigger picture, right? And I talked a little bit about the beach to battleship in 2008, and going back to Ironman North Carolina, just was kind of looking at the bigger picture. The other thing is, if you look at just the dates of everything that I'm doing, this is the first year of doing two races in the same year. So
Yeah.
I went from Frankfurt, turned back around, I went to North Carolina, and just realizing that yes, it's a beautiful area, but kind of remembering this bigger picture of where I started from to where I am now. And then also realizing this bigger goals that you end up having. So it's kind of a tie back of like, really take the time and realizing it's not just the specific race that you're doing, but it's more about like what you've done and what you've been able to accomplish, the people that you're impacting. I mean, it's all of those things that I think kind of are the bigger picture of these races. I mean, I'll just use Nice just as a quick example. I mean, Kirk Madden, I work with Kirk Madden some on in the CMG, and I was able to find other athletes that did not even know that were going there. And it's just like realizing that it's community, right? And it's like an important part of not just like your local community, but the broader community of the Ironman events and all of these other pieces. But again, just it's not myopic. It's not just finishing your finish time. It's not just being able to go do it. It is that bigger picture of where you've come from and what you're doing. And again, it goes back to the privilege that that we have to be able to go do these races.
Yeah, and I think expanding that picture, right, and making race weekends, making the experience of being a triathlete about more than just the race itself, like that's what helps people stay in the sport
Yeah.
longer. That's what brings people back again, again, and again, like yourself, because it just enriches the experience both on race weekend and day to day. So really, really good one there from North Carolina. And for folks who I didn't mention this in the intro, Coach Stephen is based in North Carolina, so easy for him to go do that one every single
Yes.
year. I imagine. Ironman Maryland in 2017 was your next race. What was the lesson from that?
Yeah, I put this one as one race at a time. And again, you got to look at the bigger picture a little bit here too. I went from Ironman Maryland to Florida, and that those were going to be my closest races, and they were at that time 6 weeks apart. So
Okay.
Maryland was in October, Florida was in November. Sorry, it was 5 weeks. But so I had to think about this very differently. And it also ended up being my anniversary weekend while we were going to Ironman Maryland.
Hey, yeah.
So so it was we had a good anniversary, but it was just you got to make sure you're backing away and realizing, not thinking so far out. And again, we just talked about the bigger picture. That's what we want to go do, but you don't want to get ahead of yourself either, right? You got to make sure that you're keeping what's right in front of you at that period of time. And so at this one, Ironman Maryland, if you haven't done it, I mean, it's a really good race. It's a little out in kind of the edge of Maryland in the sense of where it is, but you got to make sure that you're continuing to focus on where you are. Be kind of being currently focused versus trying to think ahead. And so, and I'll give just a real quick example why I also thought it was like one race at a time. I show up race morning, to be able to go check on my bike, to be able to go do it. And this is the first time I ended up going into transition, Ironman 7, that my bike tires were flat, both of them. And
Wow.
right. And I'm pressing and it brings that in. And again, it's like dealing with not just the race, but what you have, what you can control, and to be able to go do that. And like I said, the bigger picture here, why this was one race at a time, is like I was really stressing about doing these both back to back with Maryland and then Florida turning around. And then it's like I had to make sure I was staying kind of in that sense again, just focused, right? And not jumping ahead of myself and saying, hey, how do I go do this? How do I make sure I can get to this next one? I'm like, deal with what I have right now in front of me.
Or Ironman Florida in 2017. What was your lesson from that one?
Yeah, it was helping others. And again, you got to understand a little bit about the background is, in the midst of doing Maryland, I was did it by myself. I didn't really train with anybody for it. And immediately when I came back, I was able to connect. It was a local tri-store at the time. They're not open. They kind of connected me with a guy doing his first Ironman in Ironman Florida that same year. and he lived in my community. So it was just like, man, how do we connect with each other? And one of the things is, I mean, he was a really good athlete, but being us first, he didn't know what he was really doing.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I think that was just the first time I started working closer with folks to be able to help kind of mentor and to be able to go do that. And, I mean, he was a really good swimmer, good cyclist, and, he was struggling. And it was one of the things that I gave up some of my race to be able to support him. I helped him cross the finish line and to be able to go do that. And again, I'm not saying you're always going to want to do that, but it really just makes a big difference. I mean, are you going to stop when somebody's hurt on the side of the road? Are you going to give them a tire, if they have a flat? Are you going to, I mean, I've given multiple times in a lot of races salt, when people are cramping, but really trying to think about helping others. And I tell you, it helps me also, right?
Yeah.
As an athlete, when you're helping others, it takes the pain away from you, right? And so I think there's an added bonus of not just helping those others, but also helping yourself to be able to go do that. So it's really about how do you help lift people up? How do you help bring them along? I mean, one of the things I do on the runs all the time is I try to highlight and help motivate people. Hey, good job when I'm passing them, to be able to kind of say that because it really just helps them. And you don't know that overall impact all the time. And so I just think it's a great thing to remember. I mean, we always say thank volunteers, but help the other athletes while you're out there.
Yeah. So it took you eight Ironman events before you were officially the old codger who could help a newbie
Exactly.
along.
Yes.
Ironman Texas in 2018. You referenced this as one of your favorite run courses. What was your lesson from Ironman Texas?
Yeah. Hard work required, right? Is like there's no shortcuts in the sport. Um,
Yeah.
Texas is great, but the time of the year, it's hard. Depending on where you live, I mean, you end up having to really kind of think about how are you going to train and be ready to go. And it really tested my discipline. I mean, I had to spend a lot of time on the trainer getting ready for Texas. When you're doing 6+ hours on the trainer for your long rides, it even hurts more, right? And so it really takes a lot of hard work to be able to kind of continue thinking about that. Also with Texas, I mean, you can get a lot of wind out on the Party
Oh yeah.
Tulme. You end up being pretty hot, right? And you just got to realize that every race, right, it is hard, and you got to go into it in that mindset and being prepared, right? Because it really is, right? I mean, going through the finish line, it's about a reflection of your consistent work that you're putting in, right? When no one is watching. And that's the hard part. You got to do the work. No one else can do it for you. And it really takes those amount of time.
Yeah, Ironman number 9 doesn't care that you finished Ironman 1 through 8, right? Like it's a
Exactly.
new race, it's a new day, and you got to go earn it just the same. And it's easy to take that for granted. I've taken it for granted at shorter events. I'll roll up to a local sprint or a local Olympic thinking, it's just a local sprint, local Olympic, and then it ends up kicking my butt because I just didn't take it seriously
Exactly.
enough, right? And Ironman especially, you've got to do the work for every single one that you do. So very, very, very good lesson here. Ironman Chattanooga in 2018. What was your takeaway?
Yeah, challenges happen, right? I mean, I think you got to make sure as an athlete that you're preparing. I faced two flat tires right on the actual bike. And because the swim was canceled at Chattanooga, which I love the swim and I wish they wouldn't have canceled it, but because the swim was canceled, I still ended up going out early. I ended up having almost like a 2 hour wait to get tech support out there.
Wow.
And again, for me, it's like, how do you pivot? When you're 2 hours behind, and I mean, I'm like worrying about getting to the cutoff time, and you're always looking at your watch. Okay, am I doing it? And it's always based on when you start and all these other pieces. And I come running into the or running or not running, but riding into the bike finish, and I'm yelling at my wife, "Did I make cutoff? Did I make cutoff?" Because I did not want to run
Yeah.
the full 26.2 miles and get a DNF, right? That was not what I wanted because I'm working towards legacy at this point, and I just needed a complete. And so I did make it. Was able to get it completed. Barely made. It was like 4 minute cut before cutoff. to be able to have it. But it was a challenging race, and because I pushed, ended up being so hard on the bike to try to make up time that it really punished me on the run. And so again, challenges happen. You got to be prepared for them. Whether you drop water bottles, whether you have flat tires, you got to really think about that as an athlete, right, and prepare in advance. And that really kind of taught me, and it goes into this mindset aspect of like, how do you prepare? How do you visualize? How do you do those different pieces? Because understanding that and knowing that they happen and you can't control them, you need to make sure that you're trying to put yourself in a position to control what you can control.
Yeah, Jeff Boer, CEO, founder of TriDot, he always puts it this way: like on race day, expect three things to go wrong, and if they don't, great, they don't. But when they do, instead of getting frustrated about it, or instead of saying, "Oh, I just got a flat tire and I got to wait,"
Yeah.
it's like, well, okay, there's thing number one. I knew it was going to come. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I knew it was going to come, and
Yes,
it just changes your mindset about it, right?
it
Um,
does.
Ironman Lake Placid 2019, Lake Placid, first time there. I haven't been there yet. I've heard great things about the swim there in particular. What was your takeaway from Lake Placid?
Yeah, I mean, Lake Placid was enjoy the race. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm kind of going through. You can see, kind of, I'm building kind of this whole, repertoire of all the different races, and I'm like, I haven't done Placid yet. Let me go and enjoy it, right?
yeah.
And that's one of the iconic races, to be able to go do that. But again, I'm trying to work towards Kona also, and knowing that Lake Placid was a pretty challenging race, even though very iconic. It's like, how do you go and prepare to be able to go do that? And so, I had the position because, again, you got to look a little bit at what I had already registered for. I got Mont Blanc. That's actually 2 weeks after Lake Placid that year. And so, again, I really needed to kind of position, okay, where do I want to race versus where do I want to kind of maybe set back just a little bit. But, this is about being present again in the moment and enjoying that area. I mean, Lake Placid, beautiful place, and highly recommend to go if you have an opportunity, whether racing or not. But it's just like, go and enjoy that area and realizing that, hey, you got to make sure you're able to do it. And again, it's funny because, I talked about my two girls, but this was a great opportunity. And I just love all the photos of my girls to be able to at all the races. And, we actually, spent the time there. They were able to meet Mike Riley. He had his book out at that point, and we got the book signed. Just being able to go in and do those things, right? And having the time with the family was just also really enjoying for that specific race that year.
Your next race is also one that I've heard is fairly hilly. Ironman Mount Tremblant in 2019. What was your lesson from Tremblant? How different is
Yeah,
Tremblant from Lake Placid? They're kind of in the same vibe, I think.
yeah, they really were. I mean, the lesson was ability to push through, right? Like I
Okay.
said, it was 3 weeks apart, to be able to go and to do those. But I mean, beautiful area. I mean, I hate that they don't have the full and Mont Blanc anymore. It's only the 70.3 because honestly, that if I was to pick a race to say you got to go do, that would be one, right? I
Wow.
mean, go to Blanc. It
Huge
was
endorsement.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, really, really just an amazing area. But the ability to push through. I mean, realizing I had just come off of Placid, I was actually being coached, kind of getting kind of feedback via Crowe at the time, for Lake Placid. And, I was like, okay, how do I recover? And I had to really learn that whole aspect of recovering to be able to turn right back around. And it was just like, pushing through. And, I ended up having a really good race. But my body shut down on the run, right? And, I had to figure out how to be, you know, look at it closely and say, hey, how do I push through this, right? And push through that pain, overall. Because I had to dig deep. And that was probably, again, the run and that course I just remember specifically because it hurt so bad to be able to go and finish the
Wow.
second half of that. And but also I also remember it was an amazing finish, right? Mike Riley was there also. Just an amazing finish, and but just great opportunity in Mont Blanc. But I think you got to, as an athlete, really determine how deep can you go, how can you continue forward. I mean, we talk about resilience with Nice this year, but that ability to push through is hard. And I think you got to make sure you're able to do it, and you got to train hard too, right? I mean, if you think you're going to only do it on race day, you're probably not. And I think that becomes an important part to kind of push through.
Yeah, it's amazing how it's so funny just what moments from a course, what parts of a course stick out in your memory 10 years later, 5 years later, like right. And so just you recalling the pain you were in on that run course. Yeah, it made an impression on you for sure. It sounds like.
Yeah.
Ironman Tulsa, which I think this is where I first met you. Ironman Tulsa 2021. What was your takeaway?
Yeah. By the way, I remember you yelling after coming off the bike in Tulsa, right? To be able to go do that. I was, kind of, realize this is in 2021, and delays happen, and realizing going from 19 to 20, with COVID, and then 2021. I mean, I think Tulsa maybe was the very first race back after COVID. I mean, I remember going into the Ironman Village and there was nothing, and you're wearing masks all the time. But just, really to kind of realizing that delays happen. And whether it's, I mean, COVID was a big delay. I mean, I went from, kind of, so, and I got to back up a little bit because Mont Tremblant ended up being my 12th race for legacy. That was the other
Yeah.
thing that was important for that. And so I had already submitted my legacy slot to be able to go to Kona, and I
And so
had
then
been
you
given.
have to do an Ironman every single year to stay eligible. Yeah.
That's correct. So I'm like stressing in that sense, but they gave us the waiver because of 2020, and I'm like, I got to go sign up because that 2021 ended up being the date they gave me at the time to be able to go to Kona. So I got to do a race. I got to at least register for it. And Kona, by the way, ended up getting delayed another year because of Hawaii was a little bit more restrictive. And so I had to go do a race. I had to go race Tulsa, and this was the first year for Tulsa. Only my oldest daughter went with me with Tulsa, but it was like, how do you continue doing that and realizing that delays happen and things it goes back to controlling what you can control, right? And realizing that, we all had those challenges. Everybody is in the same position, but you have to adapt, right? And that becomes the big part for all of us to kind of take into consideration, right? Because, we got to be flexible, we got to be patient, we got to make sure that we're continuing to kind of accept some of those things, whether it's, again, delay in races or something changes or they cancel a swim, right? I mean, all those
Yeah.
different people. And I think that's just important for us as athletes, right? To continue trying to think about and making sure that we take into consideration.
And we do. I think we have 7 or 8 left. We're going to try to blitz through these to finish the list.
Okay.
Great takeaways from all of these. But yeah, Des Moines 2022.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the dirty secrets, right, is Ironman says, "Hey, you got to do 12 for legacy, but then you got to sign up really for another one." And so, this one, Des Moines was no one more, right? And it's just like, I had to make sure that even though I was like had the goal, had Kona already on the books, what does that look like? And it just made a big difference because I had to be able to take that next step. And I think the value for us as athletes, it's like, can you go one more? And, I kind of use BPN. If you're familiar with BPN, Bear Performance Nutrition, he's like, go one more, right? And that whole concept of going one more. And I think that's, we got to think about it like one more stroke, one more step, one more, pedal stroke in the sense. And so, that really has to help us to be able to kind of get through. And I think it's a good mantra, right? You can, right? And realizing that you can continue to go further than what your mind actually is telling you. And I think that's an important part.
We've talked on the podcast before. Physiologically, in your workouts, if you have 5 intervals of zone 5 or 6, 4 intervals at zone 4, like that last interval, particularly the last few minutes of that last interval, is where the biggest like physiological adaptations take place. Go one more, go one more minute, one more interval,
Exactly.
see the workout through to the finish line. Great mantra for our sport for sure, Stephen. So you finally go to Kona, Ironman Kona in 2022. I saw you there as well. What was your takeaway from finally making it to Kona?
Yeah. And again, I mean, it was, the finish line doesn't mean finish, right? And
Wow.
that's, and you really have to think about that. yes, we hit a finish line, but that really is just the close of the chapter of the book. I mean, and Kona, no doubt, was a very, very big goal for me. But as I built this up, it became a lifestyle now, and that's really the difference. That for me, it's like, okay, what do I want to go do next? How do I go do that? And this is where you asked the question earlier about coaching, and it's like, okay, this is the bigger view for me, saying, hey, how do I go help the next area? How do I go and do that? I mean, I actually am still working to try to be a guide. I want to be a guide to be able to help people. And it's like realizing that, yes, Kona was there, but that's just that a stopping point for you to go to that next step. And that's really what it means, right? It's not just a finish line. You're not finished. You can continue, as we talked about, and go one more. You can continue to be able to do that.
So for 2023, you combine two races here on your list: Ironman Texas and Ironman Coeur d'Alene 2023. Why are these combined in your notes? And what was your takeaway?
Yeah, so the theme was adapt and overcome, and that's part of the reason I combined them. So I decided to go back to Texas again, and I had a bike wreck. It was my very first DNF in Texas, out of all my races at this point, and it, I tell you, it was hard. I was on the Hardy toll roll, and there's expansion gaps in the toll road, and my tire dropped into the expansion gap. It threw me over. I hit my head. I was bleeding so bad from the not so bad, but I was bleeding from the head. And, they said, hey, we can't let you continue, which was fine, and it's
Yeah.
just, but I, wanted to be able to go do that. But, I had to figure out what do I do? How do I continue to adapt and overcome? And again, that's one of the things with as a Marine, it's like, hey, how do you adapt and overcome to be able to go accomplish your mission? Well, one of the missions is like we knew Nice was coming around, and I'm like, hey, I really want to go to Nice, and one of my buddies that was racing with me, qualified for Nice in Texas. And so I basically got, bandaged up, got everything set apart and went right back in and jumped
Yeah.
right and up like the day after to Coeur d'Alene, to be able to go do that. And if you haven't been to Coeur d'Alene, I mean, again, good training for Nice for sure because of the climbing. But it was unexpectedly hot, and for me, a little more hilly than I expected, also, right? So I had to kind of adjust, for what that plan ended up being. But so that whole year for 23 was adapt and overcome.
Yeah.
Because how do I go and shift from you know having something that I didn't complete, DNF for the very first time. Mentally, it was hard. How do I overcome that and push myself to that next level? But, this is where, as athletes, we got to take that step, right? Don't be fearful of it. Realizing that a outcome does not define you, right? And so that's the important part for us to be able to say, how do we overcome some of those outcomes? And we're all going to have them. And I think that's one of the realities that is out of all these races. You're going to have good races, you're going to have bad races. And I think you can overcome all of those other pieces.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. If you're in this sport long enough, maybe if you're in this sport for a race or two, you will encounter some obstacles. You will have some things go wrong, and yeah, you got to press on, right? You gotta adapt and overcome. Absolutely love it. Ironman Nice in 2023. This is the first time you went to Nice. You did qualify, and you went. What was your takeaway from going to France and racing on the French Riviera?
Yeah, celebrate and celebrate the outcome. I mean, again, I had a really tough, with Texas and Coeur d'Alene, and I was just ecstatic to be able to go to Nice for the very first time. Get another world championship. This was the first year of Nice, so no one really knew what to expect. But again, I went with a buddy that also qualified in Texas. It was good for our family, but really just took the time, right? I mean, Kona was like no doubt inspiring to be able to go and do, but Nice was different, right? And again, being able to go overseas, understanding the history of Nice and with triathlon, I mean, it was just something to be able to go celebrate. And I think, one of the things that I would give as feedback for athletes in general, it's like, celebrating your outcome. Maybe it's not perfect, but you still got to celebrate it, right? And realizing that, and there's a quote, that I ended up saying. It's like, it's not just about what you've done for the outcome, but did you do it well? Right. And, I did it well. I was happy with it, and being happy with it yourself and acknowledging all the work that you end up putting in is really the important part. And I think sometimes we forget that, right, as all the stuff that happens. And so I think that's just something you want to do. The other thing that's kind of behind this is, being able to celebrate with my family. And, it was just
Yeah.
really good to be able to do that again. And it was just, again, great experience overall.
Coach McKeely Jones, regular on the podcast. For people who don't recognize the name, she is a Ironman world champion, Olympic silver medalist in her pro career. Now coaches through Giddy Up Racing, powered by TriDot. And I've heard McKeely a number of times say to athletes, "Celebrate the race you had, not the race you wish you had."
Exactly.
And it's that same notion, like you can wish it went a certain way, and sometimes it's going to go the way you want. Sometimes you're going to nail it, but sometimes you're not. And okay, well, you had the race you had, and you got to the finish line. You did the best you could with the way things went down, and every outcome deserves to be celebrated. Because again, it's a privilege to be out there. So I love that McKeely says that. The other thing, Stephen, I was thinking as you were talking, and I know you've been um, at these Ironman events. A lot of times we have TriDot coaches there, and if there's TriDot coaches on site for an Ironman, that often there's a shakeout run led by TriDot. And a number of times where I've been at these shakeout runs, a question that we go around and ask the athletes is, "What Ironman is this for you? Is this Ironman 1 or Ironman 20?" And it's so funny because you have a group of 40, 50 athletes circled up, just very quickly. What's your name? Where are you from? What number Ironman is this? And then we go for a run. And people really clap really hard for people who say it's their first Ironman. That gets big applause. If someone says it's their third, fourth, fifth, sixth, it's kind of like a polite golf clap. And when you get athletes saying, "Oh, it's number 10, number 20, number 15," you get into those high numbers and people clap really hard for those. And it always strikes me that no one really claps hard for the people that it's their third, their seventh, their sixth. And it takes me back to like that one, every Ironman finish, whether it's, even if it's those middle numbers, it's worth celebrating. Like you went out, you accomplished
Exactly.
something, because like we said before, like no finish line is guaranteed. You have to go out there and earn every single one of them. And whether you do it for the fifth time or you're doing it for the 12th time and legacying it, like it's worth celebrating. So
Yeah.
that's the other thing I thought about here that I wanted to say. I'm rambling. We need to get through these last couple. Ironman Lake Placid 2024. You went back to Placid. Talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was Be With Friends. I mean, this was the 25th year for Lake Placid, so it was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
For those that maybe were just getting into the sport, Mike Riley had already retired. He did go back to Lake Placid and do an announcing. And so I had a couple of friends that were there. And so that was just really a highlight, right? To be able to bring them along, share that experience. Neither one of them had been called by Mike Riley before. So, pump that up. And so it was just really the ability to train together and race together was just, again, just continuing to build that bond, right? That would kind of last beyond that finish line. So again, just awesome to be able to go back to Lake Placid, celebrate the 25th year, and also get called in one more time by Mike Riley.
Yeah, he loves that race. He loves that race, and yeah, that's one I'm sure we'll see him turn up for again and again. Ironman Ottawa. We're now into the current year, 2025. Ironman Ottawa, brand new race in Canada this year, right? I think first
It
time
was.
race.
Yeah.
What was your takeaway from Ottawa?
Yeah, it was train and help others. I mean, so I officially started coaching right at the beginning of this year. And so, I've started bringing a few people on that I'm continuing to coach. And I had a coached athlete that was there with me, and he trains in my area. So we did a lot of training together. He ended up having a PR on his race. So it was
Yeah,
awesome. Leveraging TriDot where he wasn't before, kind of taking him to that next level, but really trying to be able to go out there and help, right? And so that just again becomes very important for me to be able to kind of be with community, to be able to continue to do that. And so Ottawa was just one of those, but it was more around an athlete that was with me going to Ottawa.
yeah, no, super cool. I know a number of coaches that will try to find the races where they have a number of athletes racing, and that's how they pick
Yeah.
their races, right? Because it does really enrich the experience for our coaches. They get to see their athletes racing like that. Okay, number 20 on the list. We made it to the end, and Coach Stephen, bang up job to you. Huge kudos for really keeping these concise but rich in detail, rich in stories, rich in learning opportunity for our listeners. What was your 20th takeaway from Ironman Nice in 2025?
Yeah, and it goes to the theme that Nice had this year, or the Ironman had this year, for resilience, right? And no matter what race that you've done, what race that you're doing, it's going to challenge you. And I think it becomes a really important that we got to continue to build resilience ourselves as athletes. And it took a lot of resilience. I mean, I'll be very honest. I almost quit after the swim, right? I mean, it
Wow.
was shivering that bad. My wife looked over at me, and there's a lot of gates in Nice because of security. And she looked over and was like, "I'm surprised you were able to even get your bike," because I was shivering so bad. And it was hard, right? And, but realizing, and it goes back to the whole aspect of understanding your why, understanding the community and the impacts that you end up having, but really kind of pushing yourself, right? And realizing that resilience is something you got to train, and you got to continue to go and push. And so I think, it really was awesome to be able to kind of be at Nice really as my 20th Ironman. As I stated before, it was not something I had planned exactly that way, but it was awesome to be there, because Nice also being very much, a global race. I mean, it was 86 countries were represented for 2,500 people, right? And yes, the US was the biggest, but being able to be there, I mean, as you're, I'm standing in the line and you're talking to all these other athletes about where they've come from. And, and it is, I mean, I look at the 20th really still as just a stepping stone, right? And it's both the resilience of completing all the races to the resilience of just, completing that specific race. And it's important, right? Understanding all these, what I would call lessons, but just insights that I can bring, from all these different races that I've been able to have.
So, Coach Stephen, last question for our main set before you answer an audience question on the cool down. What's going to be Ironman number 21?
I am thinking right now for Jacksonville, Florida. That is probably 21. So still kind of working through it. I have a couple of buddies racing Chattanooga in next weekend, and so looking at maybe Florida for next year. Excuse me, like I said, Jacksonville, Florida next year, which is early in the race. That's kind of one that's out there. Still got to push it across with my wife too to make sure she's okay. So I may get in trouble here now, but that's okay.
All right, on to the cool down of the show where Coach Stephen is going to answer an audience question. And then we are done for the day. And today's question, I pulled this from the Iron TriDot Facebook group. Michelle asked this question, how to train for hills when you don't have any hills around you. What do you do? Do you use Zwift? Do you use Ruvi? She expands saying, I'm decent on the bike, but hills are where I really lose steam. I am very much the same way as Michelle. So I totally get this question. It is a little tricky. So Stephen, you're based in North Carolina. There's definitely some hills around you, but nothing like Nice, France. You've definitely. I picked this one for you because on your list you have some pretty hilly races. So, what would you say to athlete Michelle here?
Yeah, I think there's three areas that I would recommend for if you don't have hills to be able to do it. But I would remind you, power is power. It doesn't matter if it's flat or if it's on a hill. But really, there's still this mindset that you got to go practice on some hills, and I do recommend that. And the Smart Trainer really is a good opportunity. I used Ruvi specifically getting prepped for Nice. All I did was use it, number one, visually so I could see the actual course. So that was very helpful. So really do recommend using a smart trainer. I personally like Ruzi because it has very good course, not just profiles, but also visuals to be able to do it. Since you're on TriDot, you hopefully should see some of these, but big gear workouts, right? That is
Yeah,
really, really,
yeah.
good, right?
Big
Focus
gear,
on
power builder, power intervals,
exactly.
step
It
ups.
focus on that low cadence, right? And high torque intervals. That really becomes very important. I think that's really big. And I think the big gear workout, which goes to my number three, is really work on your strength training off the bike, because that makes a big importance to be able to go do that. Focus on those. And if you're using TriDot, do those lunges and those squats and those step ups. I think make a very, very big difference as you get prepared for hills.
Thanks for listening to the TriDot podcast. Help us out by leaving a rating and review on your listening platform of choice. For more opportunities to learn from our coaches, check out our YouTube channel and follow TriDot Training on social. Ready to train with us? Head to TriDot.com and get started for free. Until next time, happy training.